There are some shadows that belong to ordinary things. A chair in the corner, a coat hanging near the door, a branch moving outside the window. Most of the time when we see something dark out of the corner of the eye, we explain it away before fear has a chance to settle in. But every now and then, a shadow does not behave like a shadow. It does not follow the light. It does not move when you move. And sometimes it watches back. Tonight's story takes place in an ordinary rental house at the end of a quiet dead-end road. No cemetery nearby, no abandoned hospital, no famous legend. Just an old 2-story house, a narrow hallway, and a cellar door that previous tenants learned not to open after sunset. This is episode 40, Shadows. Welcome to Watchers Paranormal. Daniel first saw the house down the lane on a cold Wednesday afternoon. He was 36, recently divorced, and trying to convince himself that starting over was the same thing as moving forward. The house was larger than he could afford anywhere else, which should have been the first warning. The landlord, Mr. Bell, was an elderly man with thin hands, pale eyes, and a voice that sounded like it had been worn down over many years. No pets, no smoking, and the cellar door sticks, don't force it. Now Daniel looked past him down the narrow back hallway, and at the very end was a small white door with an old hook latch near the top. That's the cellar? Mr. Bell nodded yes. Anything down there? Just a furnace, water heater, nothing you'll need unless something goes wrong. Daniel asked him what he meant by that. Instead, he signed the lease, and by evening he'd moved in. His whole life fit into a van, a mattress, a sofa, 2 lamps, a television, and a few boxes of things he hadn't decided whether to keep or throw away. So that first night he slept on the mattress on the bedroom floor. And around 2:13 in the morning he woke suddenly. Didn't know why. But the room was dark except for moonlight coming in through the thin curtains. So for a few seconds everything was silent. Then came 3 soft knocks from inside the closet. He lifted his head, stared at the closet door. Hello? The room gave nothing back. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, crossed the room. The closet was empty, just a few hangers, bare floor. No one in there, nothing, no animal, no person. He closed the door and told himself it was the pipes. It's an old house. He was almost asleep again when a whisper brushed against his ear. Suddenly Daniel bolted upright. The room was empty, but in the moonlight on the floor, right in front of the closet, there was a shadow. Tall, thin, human-shaped. It belonged to nothing. Then a cloud passed over the moon. The room went dark, and the shadow disappeared. The next morning, Daniel did what any rational person would do. He made coffee. He opened the curtains, blamed exhaustion. But over the next few nights, small things began happening. The back hallway light flickered. That cellar door latch was found unhooked when he was sure that he had left it hooked. Once while brushing his teeth, he saw someone pass behind him in the bathroom mirror. A dark shape crossing the upstairs hallway. When he turned around, nobody was there. The doors were locked, the windows were locked. Nothing had been moved, but the house felt different after sunset. Not exactly haunted, but occupied. On the 4th night, Daniel called Mr. Bell. He asked him, has anyone ever reported anything strange about this place? There was a long, awkward pause. Mr. Bell said, what kind of strange? Well, like sounds, any movement, shadows. Mr. Bell didn't answer right away. Then he said, keep the back hallway light on. The wiring's old, and sometimes, bad light makes bad thoughts, right? That didn't answer Daniel's question. It's an old house. Mr. Bell then hung up. That night, Daniel replaced the hallway bulb with a bright LED light, so for a while it helped. That back hallway no longer looked like a dark tunnel leading to the cellar door. It looked somewhat normal. A scratched floor, some faded paint, dust along the trim. Then at 11:47 that night, the new bulb started to flicker. Daniel was sitting in the living room. Not once, but twice it happened. Then it went out. So from the sofa, Daniel could see the far end of the hallway, or where the far end should have been, but something was standing in front of that cellar door. First he thought it was a man with his back turned, tall, narrow shoulders, head tilted slightly to one side. Daniel held his breath, and the shape shifted, not stepped, but shifted, as if the darkness itself had leaned. Daniel snapped the lamp on beside him. The hallway filled with light, nothing stood there. Then the television turned itself to static. Then the screen went black. In the dark reflection of the TV, Daniel saw the hallway behind him, and in that reflection, the shadow was closer, just outside the living room. He spun around quickly, and there was nothing there. He looked back at the TV, and only his reflection stared back at him, so he unplugged it and slept with every upstairs light on. The next day, Daniel searched the history of the house. At first, he found nothing useful. Just old rental listings, property records, a street view image from years before. Then he found a local discussion thread. The title read, "Anyone remember the Harrow Lane disappearance?" Daniel clicked on that. Most of the comments were vague, but one of them stood out. Arthur Pike, missing, 1978. He continued to read. It said, last seen at his home. His wife Eleanor claimed he had not run away. She told police something in the house had taken him, so Daniel kept reading. One comment said Eleanor had covered every mirror in the house. Another said she never allowed anyone to stand in the back hallway after sunset. And a third comment said she once brought a bedsheet to the police station. On it, burned into the fabric, was the shape of a man, a shadow. Daniel sat back from his computer and started to think, and the next line he read chilled him to the bone. She said it had learned Arthur's shape. That evening, Daniel returned home later than usual, and he sat in the driveway for a long time before going in. The house was dark except for the porch light on. And when he entered, the air smelled wrong. Like dust, old pennies, a very stale smell. He turned on every light, living room, kitchen, dining room, hallway. Around 10 after 9 p.m., the light bulb in the kitchen popped. Then the dining room lamp clicked on and off. Then the living room. Darkness started to move through the house in sections, and only the back hallway light remained on. At the end of the hall, the cellar door stood closed, and Daniel watched the hook latch. Slowly, impossibly, it began to lift. No hand touched it. The hook rose out of the metal loop. The cellar door opened an inch, then two, then suddenly a cold air spilled across the floor. And from below came a dragging sound, like a wet cloth over concrete, when a voice whispered from the cellar, "Daniel." He backed away suddenly. The door opened wider. Something dark moved into the gap. A hand appeared around the edge of the door. Not a real hand, but the shape of one. Flat, dark, long. Daniel ran. He grabs his keys and phone and he flees out the front door. He slept in his car in a grocery store parking lot. And at dawn, he checked his phone. There was one new photo on his camera roll. He hadn't taken it. The photo showed his bedroom, dark, closet door open, and on the mattress, exactly where Daniel should have been sleeping, was a shadow in the shape of a man. Daniel called Mr. Bell again. This time he didn't pretend. He asked him, "What is in that house?" The old man was silent. He said, "You saw it?" Daniel said, "Yes." "Then leave." Mr. Bell said his sister used to live there before him, Eleanor Pike. Daniel said, "What? Arthur's wife?" "Yes." "What happened?" She said Arthur brought it home. See, there was an old mill beyond the woods where he worked demolition there. So he found an iron door set into the foundation with no room behind it, just a sealed black space, and he opened it. There was nothing in there. Eleanor said it was just an empty space, like a hole cut out of the world. Daniel just went, eyes closed, and just hair stood on the back of his neck. And he said, "And it followed him home?" "Apparently so," said Mr. Bell. "Well, what does it want?" Mr. Bell took a long time to answer, and he said, "A body." That night, Daniel checked into a motel. He left the lights on. He told himself he would never go back. But at 8 o'clock at night, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his own number. Daniel stared at it until it stopped. Then the voicemail appeared. He played it. At first was only static, then breathing, then his own voice, very weak, distant, almost crying. It said, "Daniel, I'm still in the house." He drops the phone. The voice continues from the floor. "It's wearing me wrong." Then after a pause, "Come get me before it learns your face." And then the message ends. Daniel looked down at the motel carpet, and under the lamp, his shadow lay at his feet. But it was facing the wrong direction. He raised his hand. The shadow raised its hand a second too late. Like it was learning, copying, becoming. That next morning, Daniel called someone called Mara Voss. She was a photographer who specialized in abandoned buildings and paranormal investigations. She had once told Daniel she did not believe in ghosts, but she did believe people saw things. The question is, what did they see? So they met at a diner. Daniel showed her the photo from his bedroom, the shadow on the mattress. She studied it carefully. She said, "Well, it could be fake." Daniel said, "It isn't. Could be someone in the room?" "Nope, there was no one there." "All right, well then let's go down and take a look." So they entered the home just before sunset. She set up cameras in the living room, the hallway upstairs, the bedroom, and near the cellar door. And when she reached the cellar door, she stopped. Daniel said, What happened?" And she pointed. Something had been carved into the old paint. It said, "Do not stand where it stood." Daniel said that wasn't there before. Around 8:30, the hallway camera failed. Then an audio recorder near the cellar door clicked on by itself, and you felt static fill the hallway. Then came Mara's voice, perfectly copied. No seance, no chanting, no provoking. Mara stepped back. She said, "We're leaving." Every light in the house went out. She switched on a flashlight. She goes, "Let's go to the front door." They moved quickly through the dark, but at the end of the hallway, the cellar door opened with a long sigh, and something stepped out. Mara's flashlight shook in her hand. Daniel looked back, and a figure stood in the hallway. Tall, thin, almost human. Its body had no clean edge, only smoky black darkness. Two pale eyes opened in the place where her face should have been. Mara grabbed Daniel and said, "Don't look at it." The front door refused to open. The thing moved closer without making a sound. Mara turned the flashlight directly on it, and for a second the shape tore apart like smoke. The front door flew open. They both stumbled outside, and behind them, every light in the house came on at once. Their shadows stretched across the porch. Daniel saw this. Now there was a third shadow standing between them. Then the lights went out. They ran to the car. They must have drove 5 miles before finally pulling over. Her hands were shaking. That was the ghost, she said. Well then, what was it? I don't know, but ghosts repeat. That thing responded. Daniel looked into the windshield. In the faint reflection, he saw the back seat empty. Then not empty. A shadow sat there, hunched low as if listening. And Daniel whispered, Mara, look in the mirror. Mara grabbed a high-powered flashlight from the door pocket and blasted the back seat. The shape vanished. The dashboard lights flickered back on. Mara looked at Daniel and said, it marked you. Daniel looked at his palm. A black handprint had appeared on the skin. 4 long fingers and 1 thumb burned into him. But it did not hurt. Mara believed the shadow used darkness as a bridge. It could travel through places where light failed. It could copy voices. It could mimic shapes. And now that it had marked Daniel, it could find him. There was only one idea left. Eleanor Pike's bedsheet. The shadow burned into fabric. Maybe she had not been proving Arthur was gone. Maybe she had been trying to trap what took him. So Mara brought a white photography backdrop, 2 floodlights, old film camera, and road flares. They returned to the house approximately 10:45. At this time, every light in the house was already on. So they nailed the white canvas across the wall opposite the cellar door, a blank surface, a place for a shadow to fall. Mara aimed the floodlights at the hall. Daniel held a road flare in one hand. Then the cellar door opened by itself. Voices drifted up from below. Mr. Bell, Eleanor, Daniel's ex-wife, his mother, his own voice as a child, all whispering his name. Daniel shut his eyes. Mara shouted, eyes open, watch the canvas, not the stairs. The darkness inside the cellar thickened. Then it stepped into the hallway. This time it wanted to be seen. The thing was almost human. Too tall, too thin. Its arms hung too low. Its head was smooth except for 2 pale, unfinished eyes, and behind it on the white canvas, its shadow appeared. Sharp, dark, perfect. Mara raised the camera. Click. The flash fired. The thing convulsed. The house shook. Mara wound the film. Again, click, flash. The shadow on the canvas deepened. This shadow turned towards Daniel. Daniel felt a command enter his mind. Look at me. His body wanted to obey. His shadow on the floor began to move before he did. It stretched toward this thing, reaching. Red fire burst in his hand suddenly from the flare. The shadow recoiled. Mara fired the camera one last time. Click, flash. The entire canvas turned black. Not stained, not painted. Just dark, dark black, like a doorway. The shadow thing screamed without sound. Its body pulled backward into the canvas. Daniel saw faces inside of it. Arthur Pike, Eleanor, others, people reduced to outlines, voices, pieces. Lives stolen and worn badly in the dark. The black mark on Daniel's palm burned. That thing reached for him, its fingers stretched across the hallway. Daniel's shadow pulled away from his feet, trying to join it. Mara grabbed Daniel's wrist and shoved the burning flare into his marked palm. Pain exploded through him. His shadow snapped back. The thing lost its hold. The black canvas swallowed it. And then complete silence. The hallway lights came on. The cellar door slammed shut. Daniel collapsed against the wall. Mara stared at the canvas. It was white again. Almost. At the center was a black, human-shaped stain. Tall, thin, and motionless, like a shadow burnt into cloth. Mara said, we need to get out of this house now. And before either of them moved, the canvas split down the middle. Not torn, but opened like an eye. Darkness looked through. Then the floodlights exploded. Daniel suddenly woke up on the front lawn. It was dawn. Mara lay nearby, alive but coughing. The front door of the house hung open. Inside, the hallway was quiet. The floodlights were shattered, and the film camera was broken. The canvas was gone. Only the nails remained in the wall. On the cellar door, beneath the old warning, new words had been scratched into the paint. They said, "Too late." Daniel left the home that morning and never returned again. The house has remained empty for about 7 months, then it was sold to a young couple. Daniel saw them one morning carrying boxes through the front door, some lamps, some chairs, a crib. He crossed the street to warn them, but before he could reach the driveway, the new owner stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you?" Daniel opened his mouth. When he saw the man's shadow on the porch boards, it stretched into the morning sun, but beneath it was another shadow, too tall, too thin, waiting inside his shape. From inside the house, a child's voice called out, "Daniel." Not a real child, a copied voice. The new owner looked back. Daniel stepped away. He wanted to say leave. He wanted to say burn this house down. He wanted to say never answer your name from the dark. But the words would not come out of his mouth. He returned to his car and drove away. And that night, Daniel checked into a motel, turned on every light. He sat on the bed with his back against the wall, just watching the floor. And at 2:13 in the morning, there were 3 knocks from inside the bathroom. Daniel did not move. Then his own voice whispered from the other side of the door, "Daniel, you forgot your shadow." The bathroom light flickered. On the wall beside the bed, Daniel's shadow slowly stood up without him. It turned its head and opened its eyes. Most people think darkness is empty. That is why we turn our backs to it. That is why we sleep beside it. That is why we walk through unlit rooms laughing at ourselves for being afraid. But darkness is not always empty. Sometimes it remembers. Sometimes it learns. Sometimes it follows you home in one place that you never think to check, your own shadow. So tonight, before you turn off the last light, look down. Make sure your shadow moves when you move. Make sure it faces the right way. And if it ever waves first, do not wave back. This is Watchers Paranormal.